Sure. Okay, we're live.
Are we live?
We're live.
We're live. Welcome to the Sober Grind.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
I am here with my co-host, Austin
Armstrong.
and
It's a
Pej.
pleasure.
And we are today's going to be a good show. You know, I mean,
Very positive.
Positive show. Yeah. I know often we talk about addiction and how people are suffering from it, but today our show will consist of sobriety and what it means to have joyful sobriety. What it is to have, you know, what was the topic that we said earlier?
The joys of sobriety highlighting recovery stories.
Highlighting recovery stories as in success stories, right?
Success stories,
Okay,
yeah.
Wonderful. So I'm just, thrilled to be here.
Yeah, this should hopefully be a very inspiring episode for you all.
Yeah, the reason that I came up with this topic was the fact that, lately I have been seeing a lot of people who are doing very well in recovery, people that were at one point in their life at the most hopeless, seemingly, hopeless point of their lives to where they had nothing else going on. They were dying. They came into recovery, and just for the simple fact of giving themselves to this thing and surrendering, I'm now seeing them become workers amongst workers, people amongst people, rebuilding relationships. Some people are getting their kids back in their lives. Some people are getting their wives and husbands and friends back in their lives, their mothers, their fathers, and this is a beautiful thing. So recovery does work, really, if you really give yourself to it.
Absolutely. We're going to take a deep dive. I want to take a quick little pause here. Seems like we're having some technical difficulties. So if you delete the source and then add the source again and put in that stream key, it should kick off.
Delete this?
Yeah, and then the big orange button, and then put in that stream key from Facebook. And then we just need to make sure that we're recording audio.
Look at all the gritty stuff we got.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
I don't know. Internet.
So are we still live?
So, yeah.
Before we go any further, is there anything in my teeth?
You're good.
Oh, good.
They're clear.
Because I just
They're
had
solid.
some pokey for lunch.
Make sure you leave a comment, too, if you have any amazing recovery stories that you'd like us to highlight. Mm-hmm. We would love to hear them.
Most definitely. You know what? What I was looking for today is as we're talking about, the joys of sobriety, if you're out there and you're open enough to want to say anything, please chime in. Tell us if you're happy in your sobriety, because at the end of the day, it's not just about getting sober and getting off of the drugs and the alcohol, but it's about expanding and building on your emotional sobriety and being happy and comfortable in your own skin. So,
absolutely.
If you're out there, yes, what the spirit is disrupting, so you know it is there. LOL.
Mm-hmm.
Got to tap into that spirit, Anyway, so let's move on.
Yeah. So, what is? All right. Let's start with. Do you have any? Can you think of any amazing recovery stories offhand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Give us a couple.
Okay.
Give us a couple really inspiring stories.
I have this friend. I won't.
Also, hello, James Coco.
Hi, James Coco. Actually, this is like synchronicity. I have this friend. I don't really want to say his name, but I do want to say his name. So there's a friend of mine who. He used to be a client of mine. I was a case manager in a treatment center, and we used to do this group called. It was called Self-Discovery. And the reason that I even came up with this group was because my old counselor used to sit in groups all the time when I was in treatment and talk about discovering yourself, discovering the things about yourself that you really didn't even know that you had, the hidden talents, the different ways that you can actually behave, how you can process feelings and attitudes, and how you can adjust yourself and be a person that you actually want to be rather than the person that you thought you were. So this guy, he was sitting in our groups, and I won't say his name unless he wants me to, and he just actually tuned in a second ago, but he was like he was in a depressive slump, right? And I watched this guy when he would come and sit in our groups. Like, he was about my age. At the time, I was in my early 40s, which now I'm going to be 47 in a couple weeks. But he'd sit in my groups and...
You don't look a day over 25.
Thanks. He'd sit in my groups, and I would just watch this guy and think, like, I was taking on his emotions, and I felt for him, but I wanted him to engage and be, like, a part of the whole process. So he would watch all these other young guys, like, interact and do really well for themselves and kind of, like, get out of themselves, and then I remember one day when we actually started the self-discovery group, I said, so at the very beginning of the group, so who wants to talk about themselves, and what have you discovered about yourself in early recovery, and something that happened that you suddenly just, had that aha moment, the moment of clarity, the epiphany, for better sake of words. And he said, I had one, and basically I said, okay, what was it? And he said that he was up sleeping in his bedroom, and it was next to this school where there was these kids playing. He was in treatment, so he was like in his first couple of weeks. And he looked out the window, and as he was depressed and he saw these kids playing out there, he got to like see himself in those kids again, to where he remembered that he was a kid at one point, and he was like a happy-go-lucky kid and had so much fun, and the kids were gleeful and playful and just having a blast out there and screaming and doing what kids do,
Yeah.
And in that moment, he realized, like, what have I done to myself? Like, what has become of my life? And he came and kind of shared that with us in that group, and I told him, that's it. That's a self-discovery. These are the things that we discover about ourselves. And from there on, that guy went on to, obviously he stayed sober. He got really involved in the 12-step community. He made friends with really strong people in recovery. He became a very good friend. Over a period of time, he started working in that treatment center with me.
Oh, wow.
And then he was the first person to implement a adventure program there. So that I actually went on the very first one as a case manager. So we all went up to Big Bear, and there was a bunch of guys with us on that trip that were all clients, and he was now an employee of the place, so we got to work alongside each other. And from there on, it was called a Peaks and Valleys program, right? And from there on, he would take people on a ton of adventures, to Joshua Tree, to the mountains, and
sounds incredible.
And when we would go to the mountains and like be amongst all these guys that are like 30, 60, 90 days sober, and this guy's got like a year and a half or something like that at the time.
Great mentor.
It was awesome, right?
Yeah.
I can say your name. So his name is James Coco, right? And we're gonna actually have him on the show soon.
Oh,
so,
I can't wait to have you on.
I didn't want to ruin your anonymity, but anyway, so James, Jamie, aka Jamie Coco, the guy with the drug sniffing dog. But anyway, he's one of my dear friends. So at that point, he went on to work there. He took that whole program to another level. I'm talking like they would go on trips on a regular basis, and a lot of people got to get out of self and go into nature. And but the beautiful thing about it is that Jamie's got I believe at this point like 5 years of sobriety.
Wow! And, congratulations!
And
that's amazing.
He's doing a lot with his life. You know what I mean? And that within itself, here we had a man who was a total depressive human being that had ran his life into the ground, had ruined a lot of relationships with family and friends and things like that, but most importantly had ruined a relationship with himself. And he came and rejuvenated and rebuilt himself and got into the recovery process, and he's a total miracle, right? And the only reason that happened is because, for one, he didn't put any more drugs or alcohol in his body, and for two, he didn't shortchange himself and rob himself of the opportunity to actually get real recovery. And to this day, we're really dear friends. We're really good friends. And he was one of a plethora of people that were in that treatment center at that time when I was working there. This is what I think. Like, I've worked in a lot of treatment centers. So in that particular place, we had like the dream team. Okay. I'm talking like they were a bunch of great case managers that most of them were in recovery too. And we were like the dream team. Like we were there. It was hands-on. Like we were working closely with these guys, and we've watched a lot of guys in that era who are still sober that have 4 and 5 years of sobriety. Wow. And the majority of them, I mean, Jamie and I were about the same age, but the majority of those guys were, in their early 20s, and now they're in their late 20s, and you see some of them are getting married or having kids. And I mean, these are the joys of sobriety, right?
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
this is something to think about here. This is something to talk about here, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not just about like,
I
mean, I understand a lot of people are dying from the disease of addiction. Yeah, we know that. But what about when people actually come and get sober? Do they get well, and do they get good jobs, good lives? Are they happy with
It's almost not highlighted enough.
It's not highlighted enough. Yeah. So
so we're going to keep diving deeper in here. Leave us your thoughts, your comments. Keep saying hello. I saw one earlier that Pej does look really young because he's sober. Absolutely. I'll take a quick pause here. Let us know where you're watching from. Odie, forget Facebook. Just open an audition file because the audio is the most important part.
Yeah, it's still rolling.
It's rolling? Okay, we're good. Okay.
Actually, I want to say something.
Oh.
When we went on one of those mountain trips,
yeah,
I remember, and I told this to Jamie recently, that we were climbing up this one rock, right? It was like a gnarly rock, and I don't really like being in a position where I'm out of control. But I knew as I'm climbing, all I kept thinking is how am I going to get down from this rock? Mind you, Jamie had all of us grab a rock earlier and write something on it. And, so I basically put something, I don't remember what it was, something where surrender or something like that. And as we're climbing, I have to carry this rock all the way up this mountain. It was like called Castle Rock or something like that, right? But once we got to the very top, I was like thinking, how am I going to get down from this mountain? And all my fears came back up. And once we got to the top of the mountain, we all threw our rock like from the top of the mountain to basically like get rid of whatever we carry around with us. The heavy burdens that we have in life that we carry with us. So once we got to the top, I threw it off of there, and then I remember like everybody was getting down off of the mountain, and I'm thinking like I'm the last guy. I felt like a little kid again, all over again, that was put into a position where I had to like kind of keep up with my peers, but we were doing it in sobriety, and it was really a good feeling. Like
it's amazing.
And obviously, I got down from the rock. It took a little while, but
you're here.
Yes.
To see another
Hi, Linda.
day.
How are you?
Hello, Linda. Odie, can you just share Pej's post?
Yeah.
Cool.
Castle Rock.
Castle Rock in Big Bear.
Big Bear. You remember that one?
Oh, very cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So, I have another question. So, what is it about becoming sober that it allows you to re-find your passion, restart life? And beyond that, it seems like a lot of people go into working in the recovery space as well. So, you can more or less have a job lined up too.
Well, okay, when you were growing up, did you ever hear this from a teacher or your parents? You have a lot of potential.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have a lot of potential, right? So obviously, when you have parents and parental figures or societal figures that are telling you that like you have a lot of potential, when you go down the avenue of becoming a full-blown drug addict or alcoholic, and you run your life into the ground, those voices are still in the back of your head. You still remember. You have that memory of like my family used to believe in me, and now I've completely messed that all up, and I don't believe in myself. So when people sometimes come into recovery, this is what my old counselor used to say. Siamak, bless his soul, he used to say, I'm seeing something different about you. You're like becoming part of this thing. And I would be like, really, am I? And he'd say, yeah, you're surrendered. I'm like, I thought surrendering was a bad thing because I was so used to surrendering to the police. And he said, no, when you surrender and you put down the shovel that you've been digging your grave with, you're actually starting to become a part of this thing. And I go, so when you say he'd say, you're tickled to recovery. I'd be like, tickled to recovery? What does he mean? He goes, you're starting to like this
Tickled to recovery.
You're starting to like this thing. And when I would sit in groups, I'd give people feedback, and I'd start to see people change or be receptive to it, or I would start to see myself in other people's problems and anguish and buildup. And then before you knew it, like somebody would come to me after a group and say, thanks for helping me out. I really needed that. It starts to make you have a sense of, you become worthy. Like your self-worth starts to build up, and you realize like you can be effective. So a lot of people, when they get sober at first, they start to realize that they can be of service to others. And when they can know that they can be of service to others, what better place to do that than to work in treatment? That's why you see a lot of people that work in treatment centers, first they start off on the front lines, like doing the hard work, like the tech type jobs, and then they can sometimes just move their way up and do the more, some people go to school, become LMFTs, MFTs, psychologists, all that. Some people just become case managers, and they're really comfortable in having a caseload and working with people. But we need you. Like, we need more people that are, former using drug addicts and alcoholics. Yeah. I mean, truly, like, I have a lot of respect for people that aren't in recovery, that do work in recovery. We need them too. But a lot of times, a lot of the addicts and alcoholics will respond better or be able to, it's more relatable to talk to somebody who's been on the same path with them. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Linda says, doing good, glad to be here. Linda, we are glad to have you here. So we're going to keep highlighting recovery stories. Let us know your recovery story. If you have one that you want to share, we can keep it anonymous. Or if you have a friend or someone, a loved one that you know, let us know in the comments. That would be awesome. We'd love to hear it and highlight those stories.
Yeah, and I wanted to interject real quick. I just want you all to know that if you ever have somebody who's struggling with addiction, or you yourself are struggling with addiction, we also have a Facebook page called Ask an Addiction Specialist.
Yes.
It's actually down there in the little bar.
It's in the description of this video.
That's right. You can link on it. You can go up in that little bar at the top of the Facebook page and write Ask an Addiction Specialist. And then you can go in there and you can ask a question. You can answer a question. We have a lot of professionals that are readily available that are willing to assist you in any way possible. If there's something that you can't deal with that's addiction related or alcoholism related, go ahead and ask those questions there too. Kenny Gannon says, hire me, Pej. Kenny, you're already working for me. Just kidding. Yeah. And also, just so you know, on a weekly basis, we like to have a recovery story. So it's usually of any friends of ours that have some time, like 2, 3, 4 years of sobriety or more. And we like to have shows about them where it's a 3 to 5 minute testimonial where they come and talk about themselves and talk about their journey. So if you're ever interested in that, let us know.
Yeah,
let
that'd
me
be
know.
amazing.
We'll put you on the show.
Yeah. You want to address Linda's comment here?
Yes, I've recently been put on hydrocodone and muscle relaxers for severe back spasms. I take them as directed. I tried not to be put on them as long as possible. Well, Linda, I mean, I'll tell you this right now. I'm not a doctor. I know that sometimes for pain, medication will be prescribed, but I would just take it as prescribed, and no more than, because we all know what happens. People develop a dependency. But I like the fact that you tried for as long as you could not to be on it and look for other alternatives. And I guess it's come down to if you can't overcome the pain, then you must take the doctor's directions.
Yeah. Wise words.
But thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you. So let's keep rolling with the positivity, the support, the stories.
Yeah.
Do you have another good story you want to highlight?
Well, okay, so there's this one meeting that I go to.
Okay.
It's a friend of mine. He started it in the late 70s, right? And back then, so there was like these musicians that would go on tour, and they would get sober, and they came down to Orange County for treatment. So they'd go into like some 12-step meetings and kind of get talked down to. People would tell them, "You're not that anymore," and they'd tell them, "But I'm about to go on tour, like in Europe. Like I am that still. Like I'm still that rock star." So some people were trying to deflate their egos. Meanwhile, these guys are just trying to be musicians. Mm-hmm. So they started this musicians meeting, and sometimes we have this meeting at my house too. And it's really cool because you see a lot, like basically the meeting's geared around people that are in recovery that were ex-musicians, poets, artists of any type. We have a lot of ex-actors or even current actors that had taken a hiatus due to their addiction or their alcoholism. But anyway, so they come into this meeting, and when we're all amongst each other, we basically share our stories about what's happened in our lives in the past, what we're doing now. You're welcome, Linda. And, just kind of be there for each other, to where we can, like, just talk about, like, what we've been through and how good sobriety is treating us. So, I got a couple of friends that were on major sitcoms, a couple of them that were in movies. So, right now, they're some of them are just working in recovery, which is a beautiful thing too. I mean, that for me within itself shows how somebody can humble themselves. That was on this high platform in Hollywood to where they were like on major TV shows or major movies, right?
Yeah.
Or major motion pictures, like they were, first-hand actors, and now they're actually like working on the front lines and treatment and trying to help people.
It's amazing.
That's remarkable.
Absolutely.
That's remarkable. Like for me, that within itself is a success story. The coffee was good today. Yeah, so I mean, we see it all the time.
That's great.
You want more?
I want more.
I got
keep them rolling. Let's keep the positivity going.
There's this one
Okay.
guy.
I'm ready.
Okay. This is usually when I go and tell my story somewhere, I always implement this into it. So.
Wait, before that.
Sure.
I hear you have an important date coming up.
What date is that?
Your sobriety day.
My sobriety day.
Yeah, isn't it?
This Saturday.
Yeah? How many years?
11 years. So.
That's incredible.
Thank you very much.
11 years sober.
This Saturday, not yet. No fronts.
Well, it's okay. Next week we'll have a celebratory podcast about it.
It's interesting that you say this because at this time, 11 years ago, I wasn't sober. I wasn't in treatment. I had made the phone call probably on this day 11 years ago. I did the thing that I feared the very most in my life, and that was to pick up the phone and call someone and ask them for help.
Yeah.
Right? And when I called the guy and asked him for help, because the only reason I called him is because my mom didn't want me in her life anymore, and she said, call this number. And there was this guy named Max, who I just went and saw him the other day. He's a therapist here in Fashion Island. But when I called him, he said to me, Pej, are you ready to get sober? And I said, absolutely. And which I wasn't really, like I still had a plan. But he said, okay, when are you ready? And I said, well, today's Tuesday. How about Friday? So basically, I wanted a little more time to I had some affairs to attend to, but I ended up going to treatment. Yeah. So with that said, yes, Saturday is going to be that special day. Thanks, Greg.
That's amazing. So yes, the story.
One of the stories.
Yes.
Okay. So there's this one kid, right? I'll just call him the Blue-Eyed Bandit. He knows who he is, right?
Blue-Eyed Bandit.
The Blue-Eyed Bandit, right?
Got it.
And so he was actually in the same treatment center that I got sober in, and I was at this point I was about 7 or 8 years sober, and I had moved up to LA to open up some high-end bougie sober livings, right?
Okay.
And I remember that his parents were texting me one night and saying that he got kicked out of that treatment center that I was at, before, because he had snuck heroin in.
Oh wow.
And I had met him before at a camping trip, and when we were out on this camping trip, like, we kind of vibed, even though he wasn't well, like he was still in that frame of mind where he didn't want to stay sober, he still wanted to play games, he wasn't taking his sobriety seriously. Something about him and I clicked. Like he liked me, I don't know, and I liked him too. He had a sparkle in his blue eyes, the Blue-Eyed Bandit. But I remember I got a text from his parents one night, and they said he got kicked out of the treatment center because he had snuck heroin in, and he went back to his parents' house down in San Clemente. And he had stolen $500 from his dad. He was under the influence of everything under the sun. I mean, he had done heroin, he had done barbiturates, he had done narcotics, he had been drinking, and his parents were not going to let him stay home. And I said, well, then bring him up to our house. So and we were at this meeting up in Hollywood. So by the time that we got home and got to the house, his parents literally put him on the front step of our porch and just laid him out cold.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and he was laid out cold, like drunk,
Wow.
stoned, high, whatever. So we picked him up, we brought him in. He didn't want to be there. He was like a fish out of water. He was really upset that he was once again in a sober environment and in a confined sober environment to a certain extent, because he could leave if he wanted to. But for the next few weeks, this kid was just defiant. He was combative. He was not conforming to the house rules. Yeah. So one night, after I basically took him down to Skid Row. Okay. And 5th and San Pedro, which is much different than the Westwood neighborhood that we were in. Sure. And when I took him down there, I just told him, he said, so where are you taking me? And I said, well, you wanted to get high still, right? And he goes, yeah. Are you going to take me to go get high? I go, no. I'm going to take you to drop you off, and you can go get high yourself. And I took him down to this neighborhood. Now, mind you, this kid is wearing board shorts and flip-flops. He's from San Clemente. Oof. He does not belong. Have you ever been?
About to gain some perspective.
Have you ever been to Skid Row at midnight on a Saturday night?
Can't say that I have.
It looks like the set of the Night of the Living Dead. I'm talking like it looks like
goodness.
A third world country, tent city. People are zombified.
Did that scare him?
Scare him. I told him get out of the car. He got out of the car, and I turned the car around and went and parked the car on the other side of the street and rolled the window down, and I just observed. All these guys were coming at him left and right, and this guy's handing out a cigarette, screaming at the top of his lungs, Bash, please come and get me. Wow. And in that moment, I got scared for him, so I turned the car back around, rolled up to him, rolled the window down, told him get in the car. He got in the car. We went for a nice little spiritual drive, for better second words. And
that'll shock you into something.
So he's telling me I'll come clean on all accounts. I'll tell you everything. I'll do whatever you say. Wow. We brought him back to the house. It took him a few days to kind of gather his thoughts, but he started to come clean. He told me the truth about everything. That kid ended up running that sober living after I left. That kid came down to Orange County and was working in a treatment center, and then went to law school, to sign up at Fullerton. That kid's got 3.5 years sober right now, and he's studying to become an attorney.
Good for him.
And he's actually looking for attorney type of apprentice
great.
jobs right now.
Yeah.
And that's not bad for a kid that was laid out cold on
Not
the
at
front
all.
step, right? So
That's incredible.
I mean, it's a miracle within itself, and once again, that's one of a plethora of people that I've gotten. For the most enlightening thing for me, the most heartwarming thing, the most rewarding thing for me is when I see the people succeed in recovery.
Yeah.
When people get their lives back. When people actually become the people that they were meant to be, rather than that facade that they were caught up in. Yeah. This is a beautiful thing. These are the joys of sobriety.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it's always possible.
It's
never give up hope.
This is what I feel. I feel like before we even get to this earth, we all have a soul. And then when we come here, we get so caught up where our mind is always trying to make our body feel good in some way, and the soul gets lost in that process. When I took that kid to Skid Row, I said, look around the streets here. Do you see how these people are living? They've lost their souls. Basically, they've had the opportunity and the chance in life to get their lives back, but you only get so many chances and choices, and don't use up your chances and choices. Yeah. It was like that come to Jesus moment where we got to have that conversation where I don't know what happened. It was do or die with that kid. That kid could have said, just leave me, right? But in that moment, that kid decided, let's go back. He came back. He's all about sobriety now. I mean, I'm talking like that kid used to be so wishy-washy when he talked about his recovery that right now when he talks, he's like, I'm in. Like there's no looking back. And he's doing well for himself. And he has a fiance.
Ooh, good
and
for him.
mind you, the kid is so humble that about 6 months ago, he happened to be in his apartment and the neighbor didn't extinguish a cigarette and it started a fire and the entire building burnt to a crisp. He lost everything in that fire. Everything. And his girlfriend was out working. He lost everything in that fire. Only him and his cat got out alive. I mean, got out, right? And
any big damage? Like what? To people?
No, no injuries to people. But that kid lost everything. Everything he owned was burned in that fire. And the next day, he and I were speaking somewhere, and he was my 10-minute speaker. And when he spoke, he didn't even bring it up. I was like, once I got up there, I was like, just so y'all know, this guy's house burned to the ground, and he's too humble to actually have to talk about it, which is a beautiful thing. The kid is like an amazing soul.
What an incredible story.
Love him so much.
Everyone that you mentioned today is just incredible.
That's what I get.
Never give up hope, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. So, just so you know, the Sober Grind comes in many different platforms. I mean, it's a podcast, obviously.
Yeah, it's a podcast, but we're also on YouTube. We're on every major platform that you listen to podcasts on.
Which platforms are we on?
iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, you name it. Most of the links are in the description of this video.
But if you go to any of those podcasts, anywhere where there's a platform that has a podcast, type in Sober Grind, and you should be able to find us. And please subscribe to it.
Yes.
And give us reviews, and tell us what we're doing wrong. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what you'd like us to talk about. We love your reviews. Yeah. Tell a friend. Tell, if you know somebody that needs some kind of recovery or needs some knowledge about recovery, just tell them, go to the Sober Grind. Sign up to the Sober Grind and be part of this thing.
Yeah, even just taking that couple seconds out of your day to put a 5-star rating on iTunes will really help our rankings and impact a lot more people. So we can't do this without you. You are the reason why we do this, to help inspire others. And we're just going to keep continuing to do it.
That's right.
All right. So this podcast is made possible by Beginnings Treatment Centers, an absolutely amazing Orange County recovery center that handles all levels of care, from detox to residential to outpatient, you name it.
Full spectrum.
Full spectrum of care. Give them a call today at 800-387-6907, and they will set you on a very positive path. Or you can reach out to Pesh.
Yes, you can always reach out to me.
All right.
949-751-7761.
Yes. Sober Grind out. See you next time.